is Kaylee, and in this video, I am interviewing Flint Dibble, who went on the Joe Rogan Experience last week with Graham Hancock and Joe Rogan. And I asked him a little bit about his experience on the show, the aftermath, and I wanted to know more about if he felt like he wanted to clarify some things or things that he may not have been getting into during the debate that he wanted to get into, or just some more information for you if you've seen the debate that you can hear from him directly. I also wanted to show more about who he is as a person and how he conducts himself in a chill environment. And yeah, enjoy the conversation I had with Flint. Flint, how about you tell us what your experience was on the Joe Rogan Experience? And yeah, we want to hear more about it.
Yeah, so first off, hi, I'm Flint Dibble. I'm an archaeologist and I work at Cardiff University. I'm a research scholar there. And yeah, I also do a little bit of YouTubing and Twittering. So check me out on YouTube and Twitter. I did
Definitely
have
do.
yeah, I actually have my own debate reaction dropping, I think, later today. And so, yeah, so I got to go on Joe Rogan to sit down and chat with Graham Hancock about his idea of a lost civilization. And it was definitely a very surreal experience. I've never had a chance to speak to so many people. And so that was pretty interesting, especially to see the reactions afterwards. And I think it went really well, though in my mind it was all very much a blur, and I still have refused to rewatch it because I
I
don't know if
can
I can
see
listen to
why. I
my
mean, it was
yeah
4.5 hours.
yeah.
That would become like this massive blur in someone's mind.
And I
Like I'm
mean, look,
writing a response video to it, and I got into like the 20-minute mark at this point, like while writing a response. So it's I can understand why it's a blur.
yeah, 4.5 hours is a long time for anything. And to be honest, the three of us, Joe, Graham, and I, agreed we were completely exhausted afterwards. And even during the intermission break, I mean, Joe came up to me. He's like, "Man, this is exhausting," and I'm like, "Yeah, this is exhausting, but let's keep going, because we have more to get on." And well, I
Yeah.
think we all wanted to, but yeah, it's definitely a long time to have a conversation. I've taught classes, for example, and a 3-hour class is a long session. This was 4.5 hours, and especially because Graham and I disagree on so much, it made it feel even longer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've done like 2-hour live streams on my channel where it's just me talking, and after that 2-hour mark, I'm done. I'm exhausted. I need sleep for like a week or
Exactly.
so.
Exactly. I mean, teaching an hour-long
Yeah.
class, same thing, recording an hour-long sort of lecture. It's just you're beat afterwards. It takes a lot of
Yeah.
energy and emotion, and you did all this prep in advance, and so it just sort of comes out of you. Yeah.
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 So, were there things during the debate that you feel like maybe like looking back a little bit, you didn't have time to like clarify or explain things better, or things that you wanted to mention, but there just wasn't enough time, even though it's a blur?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I did a lot of preparation for this and research to try to make sure that in this kind of high profile situation, that myself and my field would come across in a positive way. And so I would say I actually probably used maybe a third of everything I prepared. I
Yeah.
hit upon my two main sort of points, which was domestication and all the Ice Age evidence we have. But one of
Yeah.
my key avenues of research and engaging with the public is the story of Atlantis. I'm a Greek archaeologist, after all. I work in Athens, and in that story, Athens is described. So I did not get to go through that at all. It never came up, even in the least. And
Yeah.
or just really briefly, at one point, Graham brought up the Edfu text as proof of Atlantis, and I actually had a whole response ready for that because it'll be on the YouTube video that drops today on my channel, actually, because it's an important example of how Graham misrepresents scholarship and evidence, and he does so in that case. It's just so blatant. It's one of his worst examples of taking scholarship and misreading it, where he takes these quotes and he puts it together as if it's one quote that tells this story that's like Atlantis, but it's actually a
Yeah.
sentence from page 290 next to a sentence from page 145 next. I'm making up the numbers, I'd have to go check, but it's like you
Yeah,
can't do
but
that as one quote. It's sentences from 100 pages apart in a book that's not even quoting the Edfu text. It's a example. It's a book on Egyptian religion, and so it's just like that's totally blatantly misrepresenting the source that you are using. And so like I said, that's a small little thing, but so the cherry picking that he does was something I wanted to get across. Another important thing that I explained, but just in brief, and I wish I had more time to delve into, is there's this misconception that the older things are, they're more likely they are to disappear, as if
yeah.
time is what makes archaeology disappear. And that's just not true. It's actually the burial environment in which materials are deposited. And so being in the water, for example, waterlogged environments are great for preserving organic materials like wood and stuff like that. The Sahara Desert, it's a dry environment, same sort of thing. And so, that's what matters. We would certainly have shipwrecks if there were massive ships from 10, 20,000 years ago. They would be
Yeah.
available for us. And destruction also preserves archaeology really well by burying it quickly so it's protected from the environment. And so that was something I wish I had more time to get into, so people realize it's not time that destroys archaeology, it's the burial environment. And in fact, many of the burial environments Graham talks about are actually really good for preserving archaeology. And so
Yeah, it's
we should
also
find
like
these.
with the younger Dryas impact theory that they
Mm-hmm.
always push a lot. If like his Atlantis civilization had these ships and there was like a younger Dryas impact, if it really happened, those ships would have been blasted on impact or like buried very quickly after impact of those like asteroids, meteorites, all that stuff. So like, where are
Where's it?
they?
Yeah. And
Like,
if it's
where's the
around the world
evidence?
and if it's global, they wouldn't all have been incinerated. It's funny. And
Exactly.
that's where I think I showed a good point where he brought up Abu Huraira as potentially being destroyed by this impact. And it's like, yeah, and it's there for us to excavate. This hunter gatherer settlement with early farming later on, it's there for us to
Yeah.
excavate, despite potentially being destroyed
Yeah.
by this impact, which I don't think the impact actually happened. But I'm just not, look, one of my goals there is I'm an expert in what I'm an expert in. I'm not an expert in geology, and I don't want to pretend I am. I'm not a media figure. I'm an archaeologist. And so being an expert is also knowing the limits of your expertise. I am not the one to qualify to argue the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, but the geologists I've all talked to have told me that the evidence is non-existent and does not support
Yeah.
that idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's exactly like that. It's like Carl Sagan used to say, extraordinary claims need extraordinary evidence. And
Yeah.
he makes extraordinary claims. But like I used to watch, I read his books. I used to watch shows in where he was in when I was younger. It sounded amazing. It reeled me in. Like, of course, who
Yeah.
doesn't want to believe such a thing? I was young. I wasn't knowledgeable about the ancient past. But the more and more I started doing my own research, and the more I started working together with archaeologists and talking to you guys, the more I saw that there is no evidence for what he's claiming. And there is all the evidence for the hunter gatherers, for the
Yeah.
slow rise of farming, for the slow rise of building, for the slow rise of creating cities. And cities weren't just created overnight. Like the city of Uruk wasn't just built out of the blue, like, here we have a city state and now civilization is born. No, it gradually continued and they started building more, and then they came to a point of creating monumental architecture with like the ziggurat and the white temple on top. And that
Mm-hmm.
was around the moment where they also had writing and they had like laws. And that's the point where you see this is the birth of civilization. This is the point where we shifted from communities and settlements to a city state, and from there on, civilization grew and spanned across the globe. That it's
Yeah.
so obvious.
I think it's really key that we sort of also just recognize how diverse our evidence is around the world. We have these different domestication events happening in different millennia all over the world. We have urbanism developing independently in different millennia all over the world. And so it's not even just this one trajectory of a birth of civilization, which Graham, I think, rightly critiques. That's an early 20th century sort of model of how to look at the past, as if there's this linear progression trajectory, when in fact history is just all the different things that humans do. And so, you know, what we see in different areas of the world is somewhat different as well. You know, different forms, monumental architecture at Göbekli Tepe, people claim that that's earlier than we expected. But I mean, we have these monumental sort of mammoth structures from earlier than that by 10,000 years. Even before Göbekli Tepe was found, those T-shaped pillars were found at other sites. And so, you know, I think we need to recognize that it's not just the few famous sites that everybody's heard of. There's so much that the few famous sites are famous because they're so extraordinarily well preserved and photogenic, but we have traces of the exact same things at multiple other sites that are not nearly as photogenic. And so therefore it's only scholars that are familiar with that kind of literature. And so I think that that's really important. This picture is based on just so many dots on the map in so many different regions. It's not like just one site here and there, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, and even like monumental architecture itself spans even possibly even before Homo sapiens,
Yeah.
because we have like in the Bruniquel cave in France, we have like these Neanderthal stalagmite circles that they created, and they
Possibly.
also created possibly,
Yeah.
but like they also probably created some other mammoth structures on the surface, like not even
Yeah.
in a cave, but like on surfaces. So I mean, yeah, it's not just
Exactly.
us that were like.
And what was it? Just last year, I think it was a publication on a wooden architecture from 480,000 years ago. And so it's like
Yeah.
another example of how wood can preserve in the right environment for hundreds of thousands of years. And so obviously when the population density of humans is quite low, you're not going to have nearly as much evidence. But if you're trying to claim some advanced civilization that's populating the globe, well, you're going to have that somewhere, you know? That's
Yeah.
how do we have, as I said, the ephemeral traces of hunter-gatherers everywhere from this
Yeah,
period, and
exactly.
yet we have nothing from this. It's yeah, the preponderance of evidence is really clear, if you see what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. So how was it for you, like after the debate aired? I'm not sure like how much time there was between you sitting there and debating and like the debate airing, but how was it for you that after the debate aired, what was your experience with like the feedback from the public, from people you know, but also people you don't know? Of course, there are probably some definite Graham stans that don't really like you and possibly weren't a little bit rude to you, but like that's unfortunately also a part of this stuff. And how was it? Like, did Joe say anything to you afterwards or reach out to you?
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, so the debate was actually the debate. I think calling it a debate is somewhat silly in my mind because there were no formal structures, and plus science is not built on oral debate, it's built on written publication. And so that's where our consensus comes from. No decisions are made from an oral presentation. That's just one other way of disseminating some of our ideas and evidence, which is an effective and important way of disseminating what we have to say, but it's not really like we sit down and debate each other. And so that was how I treated it, as me almost giving like a lecture to people, you know, and that's how I built my argument and my strategy in that way. And so in the aftermath of it, it was done on Monday and it was released Tuesday. So it was released like 18 hours after we finished, very quickly, very
Wow.
fast turnaround. They're very professional about it in that sense. And, you know, I haven't, like I said, I haven't watched it, but from what I gather, very little was edited out. And I'm fairly sure of that, just given the length of it. It matched up what I assumed the length to be. So I really am grateful that, you know, so many times archaeologists try to express what they have to say in documentaries or shows like Ancient Apocalypse or Ancient Aliens, and we are effectively censored. We get clipped out of context so that what we really have to say is not shared with the public. And I think that that's part of the problem. The public doesn't really have the opportunity to take archaeology courses in school. And so the only opportunity you have is at university level. And of course, everybody's busy with different things at university level. So very few people take them. And so it's something that people just don't understand. And that's where the response is. I was very grateful for a lot of people that sort of said, hey, I never realized that this was how archaeologists approach things in the 21st century, because so much of how archaeology is represented is really distilled what I would call a 20th century approach to it. And so focusing on
Yeah.
some grand monuments, focusing on these kind of hunts and searches and da 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 da. And it's like, man, that's not what we do at all. We have hypotheses that we test with excavations in known areas because we've excavated everywhere in the world at this point, because of
Yeah.
construction, infrastructural development. Archaeologists and archaeology is everywhere, millions of sites, billions of artifacts. And so we have a huge data set upon which to start asking really interesting specific questions about people in the past, right? Or animals or plants or the environment or whatnot. And so it's like, that's what archaeology is. And I was really grateful to see a whole lot of people take heart with that, including a lot of former Graham Hancock fans. I've seen hundreds, if not thousands of posts and messages from people that sort of said, I came into this as a Graham Hancock fan, and I left realizing how much evidence archaeology really has and the interesting questions they can ask. And so in that sense, I am extremely grateful and pleased with the result. I think that it's really important to share this stuff with people. And it was an environment where there's a lot of people who are interested in hearing about it. And yeah, there's trolls and there's assholes online. Whatever. That's something that's easy to rub off. And to be honest, I've personally thought the trolling would be even worse. So it's gone
Yeah.
better than I could have thought. I thought I got trolled just as badly after writing a viral Twitter thread about Graham Hancock that like 1% as many people saw. So,
Yeah.
I was actually fairly pleased. I think most of the DMs I've received on Twitter have been positive rather than negative. In fact, by far most. I'd say even like 80,
Yeah.
90% of them have been positive rather than negative. And so that's
Yeah.
very good to see. Yeah, yeah. I'm
Yeah, from what
grateful.
I saw online, like the majority was very positive
Yeah.
about how you presented everything and the evidence that you showed and the knowledge that you shared. I think, yeah, definitely the overall population, majority of them that saw it were very positive. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I
I
think
think
a lot of this, oh yeah.
I think that like this was kind of the best thing that could have happened at this point with the alternative community and archaeologists and the discourse surrounding both those worlds. I think this debate, even though it wasn't officially a debate, but like we'll call it a debate, it was a very fun podcast. But yeah, I think this was probably the best thing that could have happened for the archaeologists around the world because now people understand more of how archaeology works. Like I can make a video, this is how archaeology works, and maybe 10,000 people will watch it. Yay. I mean, yay, 10,000 people will watch it, but like that's only 10,000 people. That's not the
Yeah.
majority of the people that believe in the alternative side. And you were able to show that majority of people that do believe in like Graham and his theories and claims. You showed them this is archaeology. This is what we do. This is what we represent. This is the hard work that people have been trying to tell you that we are doing. Here you have it on a silver platter, and I'm just going to show you and share the knowledge. And after this debate or podcast or whatever, you can make up your own mind, but at least I've given you everything. And I think that was
Yeah.
perfect. Like you never said that it was dumb to believe in anything of it. You never discredit their belief or like their way of thinking. You just showed them this is what we do. It's
And
simple
it's
as
not dumb
that.
to
And I
believe in
love
it
that.
because it's not dumb to believe in it either because it's
No.
presented in such a persuasive way. And so,
Yeah.
like if you're not familiar with all the evidence we have, nobody's going to be able to really fact check it or understand otherwise. And so,
Yeah.
that's definitely not dumb. And I thank you for your comments. I think that was a lot of my goal going in. It was also to kind of reach people who didn't know much about it. There's people that saw the show, they might not have been persuaded, but they thought it's an interesting idea. And that was a lot of the group that I thought I'd be able to reach. I was actually surprised that I reached so many people that were fans of Graham and of alternative history. I did not expect that. And it shows that it went better than I even expected, if you see what I mean. I
Absolutely.
mean, I went
Yeah.
in there having prepped, having done the research. And, one of my big goals was a lot of people, they just respond to each individual claim that Graham makes, this site, then that site, then that site. But debunking one site after another does not disprove the larger theory, the larger
No.
hypothesis, the larger narrative that he's developed. And so I really wanted to explain to people in an understandable fashion why we're not really looking for such a lost civilization. I mean, look, every single excavation and trench that we dig, every survey we do, tests whether there's that lost civilization. You know, it's not like we
Yeah.
stop at the Clovis layer. I know he's come up with this
No.
idea, but to be honest, most sites in North America don't even have a Clovis layer. We don't even know the date of a layer until months later after we get radiocarbon results. And so
The
there
gold
you go.
site in Texas,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
this.
I mean,
They're currently making a film from the
yeah,
site. Like I can't wait for that to release because holy hell, I need more. But like this gold site, 20,000 years old in Texas.
yeah.
Uh,
I mean, you know, we
But
are
what do you
not
mean
trying to
Clovis
stop
first?
anywhere. Yeah, we're not. I mean,
No.
and it's been discredited for 20 years. I was at least I was taught in the early 2000s that people were in America earlier than Clovis, and so it's just like I
Yeah.
don't know. And most Clovis finds are on the surface anyway. So what? We don't dig below the
Yeah.
surface. I mean, look, the way we dig is based mostly upon construction. So if there's construction, we dig in the area they're going to be building stuff. That's what defines most excavations. And every single academic project I've worked on, we go down until we hit natural layers, where it's clear there's not a single human artifact in there. We don't make an
Yeah.
assumption about that. We dig into it. On one project, the director got a jackhammer to try to jackhammer through the cave floor, the rock shelter floor at Pestalaz in France. And the reason why is because it could have been cave collapse, right? And so
Yeah.
rock shelter collapse. Sorry, I get that. I keep getting that wrong. But it could have been rock shelter collapse. So we tried to jackhammer through it to test that. And so, you know, this is
Yeah.
what we do. We make sure there's nothing left below. We save horizontally, we save parts of the site if it's an academic project for future excavators with new methods and new questions. But in terms of depth, we're always trying to go down as far as we can go. We either run out of money, we run out of time, like permit time, or we hit natural, or there's like a monument in the way that we can't destroy, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So we're not going to
Yeah.
destroy something to see always what's underneath it. Legally, we can't, and plus we don't want to destroy stuff. That's not our goal.
No.
So yeah, so
Like
that's just yeah.
some archaeologists are currently digging quite close to where I'm currently living. It's a
Mm-hmm.
city called Horen in North Holland. And North Holland was very marshy for a very long time, for like the
Okay.
period of Doggerland. Even then, it was quite marshy. And after Doggerland disappeared, it just became marshland. And there were a few natural dikes. And on those natural dikes, people started to live. I was born on one of those natural dikes, but currently I live in a different part. And in Horen, they're trying to find evidence of people living here before we establishably know, you know? So it's like,
Uh-huh.
can
Uh-huh.
we go back further than 1,000 years? Were people here further ago? So they've started digging, but they started like removing one of the apartment complex buildings. And so they destroyed that building and then they dug all the way to the foundation, got that out. Everything in North Holland is built on poles and stilts.
Of
So they
course.
had to
Yeah.
like get those out because still the ground is very marshy and you can't really build on that. So, and as they were like getting those poles out, they started to see like some remnants of evidence of people possibly inhabiting the area. So they decided, you know what, we're just going to dig down. And so they found stone tools.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They found like spearheads, arrowheads. They found evidence of people indeed being in this area, even though we thought that wasn't possible. They haven't been dated yet, as far as I know. They're currently still excavating and researching, but it shows to me that even this close to my house, in a part of the world that used to be thought uninhabitable until like 1,000, 1,500 years ago, we possibly have evidence of people living here way before, hunting here in a time period where we thought that was impossible. And it just shows archaeology goes above and beyond, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
And I'm actually surprised people would not think that it's not habitable, but useful hunting grounds. Usually wetlands are very biodiverse. So the Neolithic project I worked on in Albania, I brought it up during the podcast, Vashtami, directed by Susan Allen at the University of Cincinnati. You know, part of it was one of the earliest Neolithic sites in Europe, one of them. And so part of her hypothesis is that people that moved into Europe with farming, they weren't just interested in farming, they were targeting wetland biodiverse areas because also hunting and gathering. Yeah, so did
Go
I
on.
mention the project,
Sorry.
the Neolithic project in Albania, directed by Susan Allen? And so there, it's one of the earliest Neolithic sites in Europe. And so one of her hypotheses is that the people that were entering Europe from Southwest Asia, they were targeting biodiverse wetland regions because you know, hunting and gathering in that area could supplement their farming. But yeah, it's difficult to excavate such areas, that's for sure. And so that makes
Yeah.
it also more challenging to, you know, like you said, everything's marshy. Excavating a marsh is not very easy. Yeah.
I know, like the town I grew up in was like, it's over 1,000 years old, the oldest part of it. And the youngest part is almost 950 years old, which
Mhm.
for North Holland is like near the very oldest towns that we have. Like that's the kind of oldest date because there really wasn't much to build anything on. You like
Yeah,
you can
exactly.
try and build a shack on marsh, but like marshy land, but it will just it's gone.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Not
for
much
sure.
left. So that natural dike was one of the reasons that people started to like actually settle. But yeah, we've always wondered where did we live before then? Like it's not like they came from the east or the south one day to North Holland and said, "Ah, nice, I'm gonna live here." Like, of course not. They were already in the area, but like
Yeah, it
the
was probably
evidence
more
we could
marginal
barely
living, you
find.
know, maybe some
Yeah.
pastoralism. That's something that's very useful for that stuff. I need to look it up. But Micah Groot and others have done a lot of work on animals in the Netherlands in the Roman and the
Mm.
medieval period. And so I think they've done isotope analysis that could start talking about where they're grazing. And so maybe we could find evidence in that way of people
Yeah.
interacting in that region because they were bringing animals there, maybe on a seasonal basis or
Yeah.
something like that. I need to look it up. I've read
There's
the
just
book, but it's
one.
a while ago. Yeah.
It's always a shame, like in the Netherlands, like the Romans, they didn't come to North Holland. Like
Hmm.
they just around the like the half point of the Netherlands, like they came to the south, a little bit to the east, and then it was just like, yeah, nothing left here. And it's like there was a lot, but you just weren't interested. We were just too
Yeah, or maybe
marshy.
maybe they were just grazing animals there or something like that, because that's something
Yeah,
common in Roman literature, literary sources,
yeah,
is to use those kind of environments for grazing cattle and stuff like that. Yeah,
yeah. There's
yeah.
like no Roman evidence in North Holland whatsoever. Like they did not come here. Like we weren't cool enough. We feel like the Scots and the Irish. We weren't cool enough to be like grabbed by the Romans. Damn it. No, but like to me, that shows that like even in the Roman era, uh, climatic differences in the Netherlands, such a tiny country, but even back then there were massive differences between the Northwest and the rest of the country.
Yeah.
And it shows that even back then, the Northwest wasn't the easiest to live on. Like,
Hmm.
we are a very different set of people, even in modern times, compared to the rest of the country. Like, we know, I know. Like, we are direct, direct. They say that the Dutch are direct, and then you have like North direct. And yeah,
Bam.
that's me. I can come up across like as rude or like a person that just blurts things out, but that's just how I grew up, and I'm one of the softer ones. No, I honestly think you did an amazing job at the podcast with Joe and with Graham. I very, in the very beginning, as you were like doing the opening, I thought it was very telling that as you started to explain a little. You weren't even diving that deep into things yet. But as you were explaining a little, I just saw Joe sometimes look up and look at Graham and like, this is something he had never heard. And this was just your opening. Like, this was just basic facts, very quick. Like, I'm going to talk about this, I'm going to talk about that. And you see Joe, and it's like, okay. That's something that just did something in his mind as well. I think because he's one of the biggest Graham supporters there is, because he took Graham on his podcast many
Yeah.
times. Like one of the very first guests he had, he kind of skyrocketed Graham into the kind of famous status that he currently has.
Yeah. Yeah.
Joe definitely played a massive part in that. And for him to like listen to you and then look at Graham, and you can just see the wheels spinning in his mind, like this was stuff he did not know.
Yeah.
And if Graham actually had done his research like he said he has, he would have told Joe all about all of that already, because it's not like you grabbed that knowledge from like magical books that were like kept away from the rest of the public. No, it's like this was common knowledge in the world
Yeah.
of archaeology. So if you do archaeological research like I do, I'm an independent researcher, I'm a high school dropout, I have zero credentials. My sister is a paleontologist with a master's degree working on her PhD. So it's not like I'm dumb. There were things why I couldn't, finish school. But I'm an independent researcher. But I conduct research in the way
Mm.
that my sister has shown me this is how you do it. And you can Google very simply how
Oh
you
yeah.
conduct actual research. So it's not difficult. It's not magic. It's not being kept by the Smithsonian. No, none of that. Everyone is able to do this. And Graham is someone who speaks a lot about how much research he has done over the past few decades. And it's like, where? Because I don't see
Yeah.
the
And
evidence for you doing that research. Because if you had, you would have known everything that you said in the debate.
yeah, no, and he admitted in the debate there's no archaeological evidence for a civilization, and he consistently backed down on the kind of technology they had. He ended up boiling it down to it came out of shamanism. Okay, I don't know exactly what that means at all. As an
Yeah.
anthropologist and archaeologist, that's a meaningless phrase. And they
Yeah.
looked at the stars, and it's like, yeah, of course they look at the stars. Humans have looked at the stars since humans have been around. That's what you do. You can see the stars very
Yeah.
clearly, and if you pay attention to them, you can start seeing patterns. You can see how they end up in the same places at different times of the year. And so it's just like, yeah, nobody doubted any of those things, or at least the star
Nope.
looking gazing thing. And so it's
Even
just
like with the Neolithic people in Ireland, like building all those burial mounds that are all aligned
yeah.
with a certain star, a sunrise, a moonrise, on certain days of the year, like the solstice, winter solstice, summer solstice. We have one or two at Carrowkeel that are pointed towards a moon at the highest point during one of the equinoxes.
Mhm.
They weren't
Yeah.
advanced. They weren't an advanced civilization that was lost over time. They were just people looking at the stars. There was barely any light pollution. And hey, if I built this tomb facing that way and put my grandma inside, then that moonlight will shine on her on that particular day that I want. I'm going to
Yeah,
build it.
exactly.
Simple as that.
It really is. And I mean, we see people doing stuff like that all over the world. And so, yeah, I mean, I was kind of surprised he only brought up this kind of victimization and then, which was not true. He took my quotes completely out of context. And it's like, come on, man, read my
Yeah.
whole article. I never call you a racist or a grifter or anything like that. I do think that the sources you use are problematic, and that helps disprove you. And I think that other people use those sources in more overt racist ways. So you should distance yourself from that, right? Like that was my advice. And I don't know what else to say on that.
Yeah.
And then he brought up all these geological sites. He never went to any archaeological sites that he goes to in his shows. It's like he didn't want to have a conversation about any archaeology with me. Even when he's
Nope.
at Gunung Padang, he's like, no, we don't have time to get.
The internet it pooped on us a little bit.
No, yeah.
It's
No,
fine.
but
It's
he just
fine. It's
didn't want
fine.
to talk about archaeological sites, like
Yeah.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Hello?
Like not your video, but like at least your audio is
Okay.
back. So the rest will always follow then.
He just didn't want to talk about any of the archaeology. And it's just like, what the hell? You have a chance to chat with an archaeologist and present your archaeology. And He just sort of said, no, I have no archaeological evidence, and then wanted to avoid talking about it. And, I mean, to be honest, if you see my video interviewing Dr. Lutfi Yondri, one of the things that shocked me was how he is just written out of the story. He did major excavations at Gunung Padang, and, but instead, Gunung Padang is presented in the show and even in that article that was retracted as if no archaeology had been done there. And it's like, no, he's
Yeah.
written a whole book on it. It's just in Indonesian. It's like you need to know Indonesian and know the local material. Yeah.
It's a shame. It's like when the Gunung Padang paper hit online, he was like, I'm vindicated. And then when it was retracted, he was very quiet. And I was like,
Yeah.
archaeology is vindicated, you mean? Like, what? Where's Graham? Come on, give me something. Like,
Yeah.
you screamed so loud that you were vindicated, and it was shared across the globe online. Every news outlet was saying that this was the oldest man-made pyramid. Like, you were vindicated, man. And then at the end of the day, you actually weren't, which all the archaeologists already knew. And when it was retracted, you were very quiet.
Yeah.
It's like, own your faults, own your mistakes just as hard as you own your wins. Like, if I make a mistake on my video, I will definitely own it. If I like say a name not properly, like Homo erectus, it's Homo erectus. I always say homie erectus. It's like my homie.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I just owned it, and I gave a picture of Homo erectus, like glasses and a joint, and it was like da 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 da. It was my homie, like I'm just gonna own my mistakes. It's fine. We are human. We all make mistakes. No one is perfect, but just own it and don't be quiet and think like hope this will disappear, because it won't disappear. It's online forever. It's never going to disappear.
And I have to say, I'm really upset sometimes with journalism and media. Graham tried to say that like I'm a puppet master or something of that. And it's like, no, if I had any influence on the media, I would expect the media to have as many articles about the retraction of Gunung Padang as there were articles on the 26,000-year-old pyramid. And instead, the media fell hook, bait, and sinker for that narrative, the original narrative. And then when the retraction comes, it's mostly silence. And same thing here. The media went crazy over ancient apocalypse. Do we see any articles about this conversation on Joe Rogan? No. If I controlled the media, there'd be articles aplenty already praising me and all this kind of stuff. And yet there's nothing. And so, the problem is they want something sensational, which of course is, this kind of misinformation. This
the
kind
Bosnian
of
pyramids.
Yeah,
Gunung
exactly.
Padang. It's like,
real
it's
solid science, which happens slowly and progressively, that gets ignored, even though that's the reality, right? And so,
it's exactly like that. I also love the fact that you showed that Stonehearth. Look now on the Baltic Sea, on the floor of the Baltic Sea near Germany. I made a video on that recently. Yeah, I loved making a video on it. No one really cared about it. And then I saw you mentioning it in the debate, and I was like, finally, someone that understands like the magnitude of this, because this was a hunter-gatherer structure that would help them hunting deer. Like it's so simple, but at the same time, it's so magnificent because it shows that back when Doggerland still existed, this was how they hunted. One of the ways how they hunted, how they helped themselves hunt.
Yeah.
It blows my mind. Like, I'm loving it, and I'm just wondering,
there's similar walls found in Lake Huron, for example. Yeah, and so I mean, it's just like we find this kind of hunter-gatherer architecture all over the world, and nobody seems to know about it. They say, "Oh my God, Göbekli Tepe couldn't have been hunter-gatherers because it's architecture," and it's like, no, we have plentiful examples of hunter-gatherer architecture, even near Göbekli Tepe beforehand, and so it's just like, it's just people want something sensational. They want something that's beyond what we have evidence for. And that's what makes media, that's what generates conversation. And what can you do? What can you do?
I'm currently like writing on the site that they found at the Gulf of Kambat in India. They found it like more than 2 decades ago. And like last week or so, suddenly an article popped up that this was the birth of civilization because they found a piece of wood dating back to 7,000 years ago. Okay, so let me retract that. 7,000 years ago was actually already the birth of Uruk.
Hmm.
So, like, what do you mean, new birth of civilization? That still
Yeah, yeah,
stands. And at the same time, that piece of wood was probably from a bit of forest that got submerged later on and drifted to this site because it's not even sure if it's an actual settlement. They
uh-huh,
just see some geographical alignments on the seafloor. And all the artifacts or geofacts that they found were all recovered through dredging.
yeah,
None of them were seen in situ. It's like, what do you mean? This is like, what? It's the same as like Samir Osmanagic with the Bosnian pyramids saying, oh, well, that's the Pleiades. People came down and they started Atlantis and then they created these Bosnian pyramids. Like, I'm
yeah.
just going to say a lot of things and I'm just going to say that they're 12,500 years old. And then I'm going to change it and say 25,000 years old. And now I'm going
Hmm.
to just change it to like 34,000 years old because that sounds a lot more awesome. And I'm like, there's zero evidence. Like,
Yeah.
what?
It's
How do these people
buzzwords. It's
live?
buzzwords. And, and that's the problem also with journalism on archaeology. The thing that gets reported always is the oldest thing that we find. And so it creates this kind of false impression that things keep getting older when in fact a lot of things also get younger. I didn't have a chance to make
Yeah.
that point. Like my colleague here at Cardiff University, Julia Best, she's on a series of teams that work on the domestication of chickens. Turns out chickens have been domesticated thousands of years after archaeologists originally assumed. And they've spread to
Hmm.
Europe thousands of years after archaeologists used to assume. So things certainly get younger all the time. Or, as an example, my own field of study, the Persian destruction of Athens leaves a huge set of data for us to study. And what it's proven is, for example, red figure pottery, that sort of red on black Athenian pottery, that started, 50, 60 years later than we assumed. This happens all the
Hmm.
time. The Santorini eruption, later than we used to assume. All kinds of stuff is later. And so it's just, or what is it, Alligator Mound in Ohio, hundreds of years later after we get radiocarbon dates. And so it's just, this happens all the time. It's not just
Yeah.
older stuff. It's just the media has a bias for saying oldest this, oldest that, oldest this, oldest that. And so yeah.
It always has to like change the history books. It always has to like be the oldest. It always has to like change our entire perception of history. Like we have to rewrite everything. Like, no, no.
Yeah,
Science and history and archaeology, it's ever changing, it's ever evolving. It doesn't stand still.
exactly.
And yeah, we have history books, and of course, they sometimes need revisions, depending on which history book you grab from the shelf. Because if you grab one from like the early 90s, yeah, that's not going to work
That's
in
out of
today's
date.
day and
Yeah.
age. But I mean, we have this continuation of rewriting the history books, like, and they go to like schools and all that stuff. So that's boggles my mind. Of course, we keep rewriting history as
Yeah.
we find more and more. That's assumed, I thought.
Yeah, that's what I would think too. That's what we do. Every article I publish changes the paradigm of history. Same thing with every
Yeah.
article my colleagues publish. We use new methods, we find new evidence, we have new questions. And so that's just what we're in the business of doing. We're in the business of discovering
Yeah.
more and changing what we
Like I'm
understood.
waiting for new DNA technology so that we can like do DNA further back,
Hmm.
further back, like all the way back to like Homo
Oh, it's
erectus and
coming.
all that
There's
stuff. Because
there's a
that,
lot of
yeah,
yeah.
I know, we're
I mean, it's
working on
already
it.
there. It's just a question of
Yeah.
being able to apply it more plentifully, let's say. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So like for me, it's like the human evolutionary timeline, a lot of people just have no clue. And that's why they don't believe in the out of Africa theory, or that's why they don't believe in human evolution because, oh, we're not apes or we're not monkeys. No, you're right. We're not monkeys. We are apes. We are great apes. We are wonderful. And we are very, very similar to our current living cousins, the chimps.
Yeah.
Like very similar.
Oh, yeah. Very
And we can
similar.
actually talk with gorillas in sign language.
Hmm.
We have done that. Like people are like No, you can't. Yeah, you seen that video with Robin Williams and Coco the gorilla? They had full-on conversations, and Coco was grieving as Robin Williams had passed. I mean,
Yeah.
it's clear as day. They understand us, and we can understand them. That's how close we are together in like the evolutionary way of speaking.
Yeah.
They're still our cousins. All the other human species went extinct, but we still have the chimps, and we still have the gorillas and orangutans, but we're less related
I
to the
mean, I think it's
orangutans, and
even a
that's fine.
misnomer to say they all went extinct because we all have their DNA in us. You know,
Yeah,
we all,
exactly. They
every
were
human
just
alive,
assimilated into
yeah,
us.
has
Yeah,
Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA in us. And of course, you know, Homo
yeah.
erectus and stuff like that, you know. So yeah, they are
That's I
our
think why
ancestors.
I think one of the reasons that Homo sapiens eventually became this global species has everything to do with Homo erectus and their taste for like they wanted to go further and beyond, and they did. They went all the way to Indonesia, like within a couple 100,000 years after emerging.
Yeah.
They went like they already spanned the globe nearly. So I mean, that's where we have this innate sense of discovery from. We want to learn more. We want to go beyond. That's why we want to go to other planets and all that stuff. That comes from Homo erectus for sure. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. We can't be contained.
exactly. No, but thank you so much for like taking the time and talking with
Yeah, of
me and
course.
like telling the people more about what your experience was like and having this conversation about archaeology and all that stuff.
I
And
appreciate it. You're doing a
I
great job.
thank you. I just appreciate the fact that you did this debate and you went for it, and I respect you a lot for it. Thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate it. And check me out on YouTube and Twitter. And otherwise, I hope we
Definitely do.
collaborate again, Kaylee, because I think what you're doing is important to give science and scholars and historians and archaeologists a voice that can reach a lot of people we would not reach otherwise. And I think that's really important. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll continue and we will definitely do another collaboration in the future. For
Okay.
sure.
Sounds good.
So that was my conversation with Flint. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought. Go and subscribe to Flint's YouTube channel. I'll put the link in the description down below and also a link to his Twitter. Definitely give him a follow. He's wonderful and he shares great stuff. If you enjoyed watching, then don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you'd like to see more of these kind of videos, and click that bell icon if you want to be notified whenever I upload. If you haven't seen my previous videos yet, then click the card in the upper right corner, or click one of the links in the description down below, or click a video in the end card. And I would also like to say a massive thank you to my patrons and my channel members. Thank you so much for supporting me, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye guys!